It begins by explaining the what, then we'll move on to the why, and then the how, if you like, expressed in ways intended for non-techies, it has to be said. Then we'll get to what I call the sell, because although the Hive project is open and non-profit, it's critical that we secure adoption across the board, right? And to which point I'll look briefly at why we're attracting corporate interest, before then wrapping up with the all-important principles and values. And this stack is already available in SlideShare format on the project's blog. And I believe this webinar will be published after the event too. So let's crack on. So, as I said, first off, the what. The high of the Hive project is the HI, it's the human interface. And it seems to me that when we digitalize the analog, we don't immediately play to the special qualities, the unprecedented characteristics of digital. It takes time to emerge. And the UI, if you like, is the digital manifestation of the interfaces to pre-digital physical machines. Yet now we're dealing with the non-physical. The interface between us and the machines can be moved away from abutting the machine and moved up right close to us. So that's the fundamental hypothesis, if you like. And then we can see where it takes us. Here's this simple intent transforms our interaction with the world. We're digitally empowered, increasingly important as the distinction between the digital and the analog blurs. And yet we think that the clarity and comprehension is thwarted today by multiple inconsistent and too often poor user interfaces, none of which are tailored to our specific digital, numerical, informational or visual literacy. And collectively, we can do better than that. So this table portrays some fundamental differences between UI and HI, and I won't read it verbatim because that'll just insult your intelligence, right? You can see it. But I will highlight just a couple. Towards the top of the bottom half, if you like, there's this one about the UI provides interactive information. And we're excited about the potential of the human interface to enable knowledge building for self-learning, if you like. And perhaps the last row is also important, particularly for when you speak to people in UI and UX, because the maxim, the interface is the product, has wide currency. And the answer to that, of course, is no, it's not. The product is the product. And we'll see maybe how that's established as we go through the stack. So why do we think the human interface is important? Well, interestingly enough, we're coalescing a community of interest around the vision that we're laying out in this stack. And people see in it what they want to see, which is not a flaw. Actually, that's quite valuable, because if you come at it with accessibility as an issue, you can see why this helps accessibility. If you come at it from a privacy perspective, you can see how we're going to rise up to some of the challenges of personal data privacy today. And fortunately, you don't have to take my word for it. That URL will take you to the statement by champions, as we call them, who are endorsing the Hive project. In fact, I'm delighted today to have received a letter of endorsement from the Web Science Trust Board. That will be going up there soon, I've got no doubt. As for those perspectives, well, as you can see, we've tried to display in one slide here that it ranges from human-computer interaction, most obviously, I guess, to aspects of privacy and trust, from enabling vendor relationship management, VRM, to re-decentralization, to supporting a citizen-centric Internet of Things. And we'll touch on some of these later. You may have seen this session on trust and personal privacy at the World Economic Forum conference in Davos earlier this year. That's Tim Berners-Lee, just facing the camera. And he discusses the potential for what he describes as beneficent software to help address this significant challenge of trust and privacy, a challenge that is growing in importance as the Internet of Things explodes, of course. And we were excited to hear this as we consider the Hive project to be such a contribution. As I explained up front, we consider understanding to be requisite to widespread support and adoption. So you'll see here some slides that we use to explain our vision to non-technical people. And I won't read out the text on these slides, but here you can see how our colleague Nick Hinton has adopted a visual metaphor in our storytelling. Yesterday's UIs are homogeneous and comparatively unhelpful rectilinear metal boxes, whereas the HI is your personal digital friend, ready to help you make the best of this digital world. Now we see the High Engine assembling your personal HI. And Nick has been sure to portray each person's HI differently, as you can see. Now, if there's anyone on this webinar who doesn't want to sit down and have a nice cup of tea while learning about various facets of your life courtesy of your personal HI, or perhaps there's a command prompt somewhere demanding your immediate attention. For the rest of us, this is a wonderful thing. More seriously, ask anyone to describe their life and they'll reference physical, mental and financial health, friends and family, work, hobbies, education, etc., etc. Now reconcile that with the supercomputer in your hand, otherwise known as the smartphone. Today, what a fantastic device, and yet it's only capable of allowing you to view your life as a bunch of branded silos. We can do better than that. Right, so this slide explains why this eventuality is good for business too. Business incurs less cost and less risk. It builds participation, trust, loyalty, and frees up their time and money to focus on what they actually do for you. The product is the product. And lastly, in this short sequence of visual storytelling, if you like, we remind people that the Hive project is entirely open. And we see the idea that the word user is so last season. I mean, it's easy to forget that it's the same word that we use to describe people addicted to hard drugs, right? It's just a little bit disrespectful. We're more than just mere users. So we say, be gone days of the user, and welcome back the human. So here you can see a transition of 3 topologies over 3 decades, if you like. So the squares are organizations, for want of a better word, or the machines that proxy for them. The blue is the interface sitting between the organizations, and the circles, the individuals, and the lines represent relationships. And since the 90s, organizations have been able to present websites and apps that customers can interact with. End of. Like it or lump it. In the noughties, we witnessed the rise of social media and intermediaries such as Facebook. And they sit in the middle, if you like. Now, their UI and policies do not correspond, as far as we're concerned, with anything we're trying to do with the Hive project. And as the saying goes, the users are the product. On the right-hand side, we've moved the interface from the machine through the middle and right the way around to, if you like, wrapping around the people that count in this whole network of things, right? People. It's the interface that aspires to be perfectly yours, and the network is decentralized, and the relationships are disintermediated. And for once, across every facet of life, individuals have the opportunity to visualize and contextualize data and information spanning organizations. So this gets a lot of attention, as you can imagine. One of our team, Jeremy Ruston of TiddlyWiki fame, looks at those blue parts as not just interfaces but servers. But it's an interesting point I wanted to leave with you, but I'm not going to explore that further on this webinar. Where's the next slide? There we go. So our project has 3 interrelated parts, and they commence in order from left to right here. But then, as far as we're concerned. They continue to run forever concurrently. So over on the left, this is the philosophy, this is the outline, this is the framework without getting into code, that tries to establish the dynamics of the high engine, as we call it, personalization data, and the high components available to it, and the privacy parameters. With that in place, we know then what we're trying to build, the software platform that renders the interface that aspires to be perfectly yours, and that's based on your individual needs, your preferences, your familiarity and proclivities, progressively enhancing and reducing, adapting to device and context, as you can see there. So that's a serious piece of work. And dropping out from that then, as that comes to fruition, then around that a community can form where we can develop the high components, the materials the high engine works with, models and graphical libraries, methods. So that's the scope of the project. It's quite ambitious, as you can see. Let's focus in a little bit more on the high engine. We like to think of 4 levels of personalization. You can find those on our FAQs, or you can click the link on the slide stack. But most importantly, I think what we're trying to do is make sure that the individual, the human, the citizen, is in the driving seat. They should understand how their personal data lives and breathes. Who has access to it and how is it being used? And we were very keen to contribute to the UN Data Revolution group on that matter. To the lower right, you can see some stages that we think will expand through as the HI project grows. The first manifestation we call the provider HI, which replaces or supplements an organization's existing UI with HI. With broader adoption and some appropriate technical architecture that has to come into play, we can then achieve service HI, which can span accounts with different banks, for example, before reaching the picture of having a nice cup of tea that we saw earlier, labelled here as the life facet HI. Critically, it really is important to note here that the HI project is not an intermediary. So you may be attracted to some of the HI project's deliverables, but if we're to secure widespread adoption, as I said earlier, we need the majority to be equally attracted. In other words, we're not backwards in coming forwards with the cell. In summarising the individual's problems today, this slide kind of wraps it up. There's an unease about personal data and privacy, there's a lack of clarity and comprehension, there's poor accessibility, even more things to interact with digitally, and there's a frustration in our attempts to join it all together, to make sense of our world, to learn about ourselves and make sense of it. Just as importantly, organisations have a stack of problems too, which are also our opportunity. This speaks to openness and trust, and the commercial opportunity to grow loyalty, and new opportunities to create mutual value. And it speaks to the disintermediation and reassurance when it comes to, I guess, nascent concerns when it comes to hyper surveillance. After all, many people on this call will know that if we think we're being surveilled right now, we ain't seen nothing yet. And so we think our route to market, once the HI engine is ready to be used in anger and we have sufficient components for it to play with, we think challenger brands are the way to open this market up, if you like. Just as each country, for example, had a challenger brand mobile operator back in the day, who first tore down those walled gardens, allowing their customers to roam freely on the web, and the others had to follow, we believe there'll be enlightened and hungry challenger brands who will see similar advantage in adopting HI over UI. And there's nothing to dislike and everything to like here when it comes to national and local government too. That's how we get the human interface, this empowerment in the hands of people by doing it through the organizations they already deal with. And here we make the simple point that with traction, we gain more traction. Of course, if you play that back the other way, it also means that right now we have the toughest task of all, which is achieving what one of our team calls super credibility. We have to gather a community, a momentum to continue to execute this vision. Individuals served better by HI will seek it from those they choose to do business with. So I mentioned earlier that we want to do this with corporates. And so I'll skip very briefly through some of the reasons here why they're attracted to us. A citizen-centric Internet of Things isn't, as much as we might like on this call, a default outcome. We help help make that more likely with the HI project. And that has some advantages for organizations looking to contribute and derive value in this space more quickly. Some companies will love the re-decentralizing nature of the HI project, effectively re-leveling the playing field. Others will cherish the opportunity to build relationships with individuals, perhaps for the very first time, well, beyond a like on Facebook for what it's worth. And we're seeing particular interest amongst those companies in the health sector, specifically those not in a data broking position. And of course, lest we forget, some businesses do attend to the so-called triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And that's all in the mix here. You'll forgive the cat, bottom right, but when I first presented the HI project, I was sharing a stage with BuzzFeed, and you couldn't get away without including a cat, right? Right, I said I'd finish this stack on principles and values, leaving a lot of time for some Q&A. And I do want to spend some time on these because it's what binds the community, right? So we've taken this, we've adapted the Rochdale principles, which, for those who don't know, were the principles that underpinned the development of the cooperative movement in the 20th century. So we are open and voluntary. We describe ourselves as sociocratic, which is a slight change on democratic from the Rochdale principles. But that means that we're focused on consent-based decision-making and decentralized autonomy. Anyone involved in the web today will recognize these principles. Participation is a fundamental principle. The more you contribute, the more you'll derive. Autonomy and independence, this is by members of the HI project for everyone who benefits from the HI project. It's transparent. We're fundamentally trying to help drive the learning and education vision that's implicit to the very design of the web. We're cooperative and we're about community. And actually, one of the things that people do really like about our draft values here, we call them draft because as the community grows, you know, there's room for iteration, but it's this idea that consensus best follows dissensus. This is a really broad, deep, ambitious project, and it won't go smoothly. It never does, but that's to be celebrated, not to be mourned. And yes, I'm really looking forward to it. So that's the HI project. I'm wondering, Ian, whether we have any questions lined up.
Well, I'm going to open up the webinar for people to ask questions either via their microphone or via the chat. So I'm just going to unmute you now. If you do have a question, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and put your question to Philip. So let me see, unmute. So I think you guys should now be able to ask questions if you'd like to. If I can go first, Philip, thank you. That was really interesting. It is, though, in some ways quite abstract. Can you talk to me a little bit about how could people listening to this webinar get involved in the HI project? What would you be looking for from collaborators?
At the very least is to visit the website and join, so that you're on our mailing list, so we can keep in touch with you and let you know how we're progressing, so that you can bring your je ne sais quoi at the right point and right time. You can follow at HI Project and obviously retweet us endlessly. Tell all your friends and colleagues. But fundamentally, of course, we're at the point where we're assembling an engineering team. We want to start collaborating on that framework and start coding that engine. And your contributions, small and large, will be invaluable. I mean, that's the thing about this web thing, right? Stuff gets done when we each of us decide that stuff needs to get done. I should add that I'm delighted to be working with a company called Linaro. It's, I think, numbering 250 engineers based in Cambridge in the UK. It's a non-profit that was formed about 5 years ago now, I think, originally to port Linux to ARM architecture. But now they specialize in working with a variety of members on what they call non-differentiating technology. So technology that it doesn't make competitive sense for any one of their members to do separately. And they consider the HI project to be a fascinating new program that they can train their resources on. So we're now talking to potential members to start kicking off that Linaro program focused on realizing the first manifestations, the first versions, the first proofs of concept of the HI engine.
So will that ultimately translate into a set of GUI objects or APIs, or what would you expect to come out of that?
You'll be able to actually go to our GitHub page and see some code for a start, as opposed to a blank page today. You will be able to start formulating ideas on how the personalization will work across those 4 levels, how we will architect the slightly thicker than thin client, the way in which a challenger brand can literally swap out their existing UI and start placing in our HI. Now, we've got schematics for this that we haven't actually published yet. We're still working them up so that, if you're trying to build credibility, you want to put something out there for the first time where people can see, I can see where they're going, as opposed to just have a little gentle laugh. So bear with us. Join us in actually getting those first schemas to a point where we can start making them public and building up from them.
Okay, so there's a GitHub project which is currently waiting for more members. There are a group of collaborators. Are you looking for input on the design itself? Or what?
Yeah, we're looking for engineers specifically who can focus on the HI engine, because understanding what we need from people who can develop the components that reflect all the interfaces that are perfectly yours for all of your facets of life. Obviously, the way in which they may spec and deliver those components will be qualified by the design of the HI engine. So it does happen in this sequence. So right now, we're focused on engineers who think, hey, I know how that HI engine should work. I need to put my 2 penneth in from day one, and day one is right now.
Okay, well, there's an invitation to anyone who's listening to this webinar live or to the recording after the event. Let me just ask one more time: are there any other questions for Philip about the presentation or about the HI project? I think I've got everybody unmuted. Apologies if you're trying to ask a question and we're not hearing you, but
Ian, there's another point I could add here, which is, of course, I invest a lot of my time, Monday to Friday right now, visiting a number of those corporates that I described, from their different interests, whether it's disintermediation, re-decentralization, citizen-centric Internet of Things. If you, as I was going through those slides, thought, I know company X, company Y, brand Z, they need to understand the Hive project. This is right up their street. This fits with their values. This fits with their focus on the triple bottom line. They understand that this is good for each of the people, the profit, and the planet. Then please, by all accounts, make the introductions as an extended member of the Hive project network yourself, or just ping me a line and let me know who I should speak to, particularly if you have an individual's name. That'd be great.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, I think we're at the top of the hour. I think if there are no more questions, I'm gonna wrap it up for this afternoon, and I'd like to thank Philip for his time and for a very interesting introduction to the Hive project. I'm looking forward to seeing who gets on board and looking at some demonstrations and some proof of concept soon.
Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.